This is Tom Fox, and I'd like to welcome you to a new season of the award-winning Adventures in Compliance, the podcast where we look at the Sherlock Holmes short stories, movies, novels, and related material from the angle of compliance. In this season, we're going to take up the novels of Arthur Conan Doyle around Sherlock Holmes. Of course, there are 4 of them: A Study in Scarlet, Hound of the Baskervilles, perhaps the most famous Sherlock Holmes story, The Sign of 4, and The Valley of Fear. We're going to take a deep dive into each one of these novels and going to explore them over 4 podcasts. So it'll be over the next 4 months that we'll be taking a deep dive into this season. The novels in many ways fill in the gaps about how and why and what Holmes does, and they're really a delicious deep dive exploration of Sherlock Holmes, his methods, his friendship with Watson, more of the backstory on Watson. And if you have the opportunity, they're relatively short, about 100 to 125 pages per novel. I would urge you to read these novels in their entirety. You can collect them in one work and do that. And I had a ton of fun reading them and preparing for this new season. There are some great stories in here, and I know you will enjoy them. And I hope you will enjoy this season of Adventures in Compliance really as much as I've enjoyed reading the stories. Today we're going to take a deep dive into a character I've long wanted to explore on Adventures in Compliance, and that's, of course, Holmes' sidekick, Dr. John Watson. In this podcast, we look at how they met, and Watson's initial impressions of Holmes, but more importantly, what does the character of Watson bring to the compliance professional for lessons learned. I'm not going to review the storyline in A Study in Scarlet for this episode, but I'm going to go directly into what I think are 5 key lessons for compliance professionals around internal investigations. When Doyle introduced the world to Sherlock Holmes, he did not just give us the world's greatest fictional detective of all time. He gave compliance professionals a masterclass in investigative methods. Holmes, through his cool logic, careful observation, and relentless pursuit of the truth, modeled what every corporate investigator should aspire to emulate. From his analysis of the crime scene to his use of deceptive tactics to expose a suspect, Holmes' first published case offers a trove of lessons that remain strikingly relevant to the modern compliance professional today, especially when dealing with internal investigations, whistleblower reports, and root cause analyses. I put together 5 enduring investigative lessons grounded in the facts of A Study in Scarlet that I believe today's compliance professionals can apply in their own work. Number 1, let the evidence speak first, not the theory. One of the first things Holmes teaches us is the grave danger of leading with assumptions rather than facts. When Inspector Lestrade and Gregson investigate the murder of Enoch Drebber, they are both eager to find a suspect who fits their preferred narrative. Gregson arrests Drebber's secretary based on superficial motive, while Lestrade clings to his own version of the story. Holmes, however, takes a different path. Arriving at the crime scene in Larston Gardens, he examines the word "raquet" scratched in blood on the wall, and the unbroken nature of the room's furniture in the presence of a woman's wedding ring. He concludes that the scene was not done out of chaos or robbery, but of deliberate, psychological, motivated killing. For compliance professionals, the takeaway is clear. Let the data in our world may mean transaction records, communications, audit trails, or hotline complaints drive your theory and not the other way around. Jumping to conclusions only compromises your investigation and could lead to unfair or incomplete results and outcomes. Number 2, small clues are often the most telling. Holmes never overlooks a detail, no matter how insignificant it may seem. In fact, his most profound insights often stem from his things his peers dismiss. At the murder scene, Holmes deduces the height of the killer from the placement of the writing on the wall and notes the absence of a struggle as a key indicator that the decedent was poisoned rather than physically attacked. Later, when he obtains 2 pills from the scene, one harmless and one poisonous, he tests them on a dog to confirm his hypothesis. These details become central to reconstructing the killer's method. In the compliance world, small anomalies in third-party payments, subtle shifts in employee communication, or often overlooked minor incidents reported on the hotline can be red flags that lead to the truth. Investigators must train themselves and their teams to see what others don't and to treat every piece of data as potentially meaningful going forward. Number 3, reconstruct the crime with logic and imagination. One of Holmes' greatest strengths is his ability to reconstruct a crime scene through a blend of logic and imaginative deduction. After assembling all of the facts of Drebber's death, Holmes theorizes how Jefferson Hope forced him to choose between 2 pills, one deadly and one safe, in a cruel game of judgment. He does not merely catalog the evidence, he walks through the killer's mind. The synthesis of rational deduction and psychological insight allow him to understand not what just happened, but why it happened. For compliance professionals conducting internal investigations, especially those involving fraud or misconduct, it's not enough to trace the actions. You must understand the motives. What systemic pressure or cultural failure might have led an employee to override controls? Why did a gatekeeper ignore a red flag? Understanding context is the key to a sustainable remediation and prevention going forward. Number 4, use deception strategically to draw out truth. While Holmes champions truth and logic, he is not above giving controlled deception to provoke a suspect into action. Knowing that the wedding ring left at the crime scene was a vital clue, Holmes places a newspaper ad claiming the ring has been found. Sure enough, someone responds. Jefferson Hope sends a disguised accomplice to retrieve it, confirming his connection to the crime. Holmes had baited the trap and the suspect walked into it. In today's corporate compliance landscape, this tactic translates in strategic methods such as data testing, shadow audit trails, and controlled disclosures to elicit suspicious behavior. For example, a company might issue a false positive vendor warning to see if internal employees tip off a bad actor. Used ethically and legally, these techniques can help compliance officers detect collusion, data manipulation, or other efforts to prevent circumvention of controls before they lead to enforcement actions. And number 5, motive often lies in the past, not just in the present crime. Perhaps the most striking decision in A Study in Scarlet is Doyle's long flashback to Jefferson Hope's life in Utah, where his love, Lucy, is taken by force and ultimately dies under the oppressive control of a corrupt religious community. His subsequent quest for revenge spans years and continents, culminating in the murders in London. Holmes' understanding of the emotional, historical, and moral motive behind these crimes allows him to see the case in ways others cannot. The compliance lesson here is that misconduct is often the result of past failures, systemic weaknesses, ignored warning signs, or festering cultural issues. If a rogue employee commits bribery in 2025, the root cause may trace back to lax oversight during a 2022 acquisition or a culture that normalized corner cutting. That's why the 2024 evaluation of corporate compliance programs stresses the importance of root cause analysis as a separate and essential function from the investigative function itself. Knowing what happened is only half the battle. Knowing why it happened is the key to fixing it. Sherlock Holmes was a detective, not a compliance officer, but his methods were far ahead of their time, aligned perfectly with the expectations of regulators placed on corporate investigations. He followed the evidence, prized details, understood motives, and employed strategic deception, always sought to see the full picture. For compliance professionals, A Study in Scarlet is more than a Victorian murder mystery. It's a field manual on the art of inquiry. In a time when DOJ guidance and enforcement actions increasingly emphasize the quality of investigations, sophistication of root cause analysis, and the proactivity of compliance program, we'd all do well to keep a little Holmes in our toolkit. After all, as Holmes reminds us often, there is nothing more deceptive than the obvious fact. This concludes our initial look into the Sherlock Holmes novel, A Study in Scarlet. As I mentioned at the start, I hope you will take the time to read this novel. It's a great detective novel, lots of lessons learned for the compliance professional, and lots to say about compliance programs, and ethics in an organization. The award-winning podcast, Adventures in Compliance, is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. Have you ever thought about starting a podcast? Would you like to start a podcast? In 2025, I think it would be a great time for you to start a podcast, and you can post it on the Compliance Podcast Network, the only podcast network in compliance, and by far one of the most popular B2B podcast network around. So if you'd like more information on starting a podcast, please give me a shout. You can reach me at tfox@tfoxlaw.com. I hope you will join me again next week, where we will conclude our 4-part exploration of A Study in Scarlet. We've looked at the story and compliance lessons generally. We focused on Dr. Watson. And today, of course, we looked at some of the investigative lessons learned. Next week, I want to wrap it all together, perhaps talk about some ethical issues or other compliance-related issues that you can use in your compliance program today. These are wonderful stories, and I cannot recommend them highly enough to you. If you haven't read the novels or you haven't read them in a long time, I hope you will take this opportunity to read A Study in Scarlet and think about how it relates to your work as a compliance professional.
This podcast is a part of the C-Suite Radio Network. For more top business podcasts, visit c-suiteradio.com.
Compliance Podcast Network. Start your mornings with daily compliance news, quick, sharp updates on the top compliance and ethics stories in under 5 minutes every morning in Compliance Podcast Network. Because compliance never sleeps. Need practical advice fast? Check out Compliance Tip of the Day. One actionable idea to level up your program. Short and sweet, every day on Compliance Podcast Network. Got 10 minutes? We've got the week's top 10 stories. 10 for 10 brings you the big compliance headlines. Fast, fun, and focused. Every Saturday on Compliance Podcast Network. And don't miss the Sunday Book Review, where compliance meets culture through must-read books and big ideas every Sunday in Compliance Podcast Network. Whether you're in the office, on a walk, or commuting, stay smart, stay ethical, stay tuned. Only on the Compliance Podcast Network. Available wherever you listen to podcasts.